But, like, she's like, I'm getting older. And she's like, it's like, no, you're not, Ellie. Relax. You're not getting, like, you're still, like, you're still young. But she has that mentality, like, oh, my God, like, I'm going to be like the lonely cat lady, type of thing.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like she has that mentality towards the beginning. And then, like, at the end, you see her, like, going towards a goal that she had wanted.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast Homespun Script. I'm your host, Nate Knispel. With me today is adult romance author Regina Brownell. Did I say your last name right?
You did. You're like one of the first people to actually say my name right.
I got it the first time.
It's usually Brownwell.
Oh, okay.
That's what everybody says.
Okay. I'm not going to edit that out because I'm proud of it. Anyway, so Regina has penned 5 novels to date, and today we will be discussing her 2022 release, The 2-Week Promise. The novel is written from the perspective of Ellie, a 24-year-old woman living in Long Island. The morning after her best friend Charlotte's wedding, Ellie finds herself in bed with Charlotte's older brother Logan. This would not ordinarily seem to be a problem, but long ago, Ellie and Charlotte established a set of rules, and by sleeping with Logan, Ellie has broken rule number 5. Over the next 2 weeks, while Charlotte enjoys her honeymoon, Ellie and Logan must decide if their relationship is simply a short fling or something more. Throughout the process, both must deal with a nagging sense of guilt regarding Charlotte, their emotional growth, and what turns out to be a less enigmatic past than they ever noticed. Here's Regina reading a section of her novel.
Charlotte sets down her fork and scowls at me. As her mouth opens, I get that skin-prickling feeling again. Tiny goosebumps crawl up my arm. I look briefly around the room, hugging myself and rubbing along my skin. Charlotte's rambling on about how when she returns from her honeymoon, we're going to find me a husband. And as the word crosses her lips, Logan comes into view. His cocky smile doesn't fade as he catches my gaze from across the room. Leaning against the bar, he lifts a glass with dark-colored liquor inside, like he's toasting to me, then tips it back and rests it on the counter. His intense honey-brown eyes never leave mine. It's like he's challenging me, and to be honest, I could use a drink or two. Hello, Earth to Ellie, Charlotte waves her hand in front of my face. What? Who are you looking? She adjusts so that her body is straight, and she's facing the bar across the way. Logan, being Logan, purses his lips and wiggles his brows. Her shoulders sag, and she shakes her head. Is he bothering you? Because I can kick his ass if he is. Logan is rule number 5. I've already made a vow from deep within my heart to never, ever break that rule. I huff. Nah, I think he wants to do shots. My brother has a stomach like a tank. You'll be on your ass in one drink. She narrows her eyes as if she's speaking to him through their sibling bond. They are probably yelling at each other. I can hear them in my head, her telling him to go easy on me because my heart is fragile, and him telling her I can handle it. Charlotte and Logan, although he left for a few years, are very close. Logan has never treated either one of us badly. He's always been there in a brotherly sort of way for me, too. He's attractive, I'll give him that, with his perfect jawline and sexy dark eyes, but he's also a player and off limits, although I highly doubt he would ever look at me in that way. I make the mistake of glancing over his way again, and somewhere inside of me there's a growing desire to find out what it would be like to have Logan. It's an awful thought. No, it's a dangerous thought. To get Logan out of my head, I scan the dance floor. Josephine is a stunning vision in navy blue. Her hair is set atop her head in an updo with 2 strands curling against the sides of her face. She's dancing with her new boyfriend, Tommy. His tall, sturdy frame envelops her as they sway. It's nice to see her smiling and happy once more. Through the crowd on the dance floor, my gaze catches Logan again. His eyes are on his mom and Tommy. The grin he held for me has changed to a frown, while his hands rest at his side in closed, tight fists. May I have my wife? Brian towers over me, eyeing Charlotte with love in his eyes that you don't find every day. A soft smile dances on his lips as he regards her. Of course, I'm going to get a drink. Charlotte's brow raises, and I shrug, but give her a smile to let her know I promise not to get myself into trouble. but I'm not entirely sure I can keep that promise.
Thank you, Regina. That was fantastic. Yeah. And that's from the very beginning of the book, at the wedding, correct?
Yep,
Okay.
that is the beginning when her best friend gets married.
So thank you for joining me today. It's a pleasure and pleasure and privilege. I always have difficulty saying that. Pleasure and privilege to talk with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have been a stay-at-home mom for about 10 years. I have 3 children, 3 cats too. And I started writing when I was very young, but when the pandemic hit and everything, I decided I wanted to try it out for real. And so I started writing, and in 2021, I ended up getting an offer, and that's pretty much what my life is right now, is writing and taking the kids places and doing all the mom and writing stuff together.
So you have 2 full-time jobs.
Yes, basically.
So you gave me a pretty good idea of how the 2-week promise came to be. This is your first novel, correct?
It was, yes.
Okay, cool. So how did you get the idea to write a romance novel, and what was your process in this? It seems like it was an outgrowth of COVID in some capacity.
Yeah, well, I had been writing, like I said, since I was little. I started with fan fictions. My first story was did you ever see the movie Twister?
With the tornado?
The tornado, yeah.
Okay.
I wrote a fan fiction when I was in 5th grade in my notebook because I loved that movie so much. And I wrote it about the 2 main characters falling in love when they were in middle school. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I always had that that connection. I always loved that aspect, even from a young age. I loved, seeing the development of a relationship in a book and, how they cared for each other. So that was always a thing for me. But, I started with that. And then as I started writing more, I finally decided to write more adult romance. And so this was actually not my first try at it. I did actually, my second novel is actually the first one I fully wrote, but I didn't do anything with. The 2-week promise is the one that I was like, you know what, this one is going to do it, because it was fun, and it was, one of those rom-coms were very, very popular at that time. Mm-hmm. So I decided let's have a go at it. And the idea, it just kind of came to me while I was sitting there one day, and I'm like, I saw these characters in my head. And it's so weird because I don't know about anybody else, but I can visualize, I see it like a movie in my head. Mm-hmm. So I saw this girl waking up, and she was next to somebody, and she didn't know how she got there. Mm-hmm. And so I just went through all different scenarios in my head, and I had just finished reading a best friend's brother book. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you know what, let me try that. And it just kind of took off from there.
It flew from there. That's awesome. Yeah. Cool. So you're going to have to be maybe a little bit patient with me. I'm not terribly well versed in the genre of romance. So if I ask a stupid question, just say, no, that's not the right question to ask.
That's okay. No question is.
All right. I'm going to be relying on you a lot on this. So I imagine writing characters in a romance novel presents its own set of difficulties. And could you maybe, you say you visualize the characters, and can maybe talk a bit about how you approach this process of character creation?
Well, honestly, I am a pantser. Uh-huh. So it just kind of I'll start to see a movie in my head, and sometimes it'll stick and sometimes it won't. The characters are usually the ones that I see first, and I'll see them doing something, and then I'll just sit down, I'll start writing it. If it takes off, it takes off. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And then as I go through, I will write down their character traits. I have tried many times to do those character worksheets, and trying to plan them out beforehand. And it really stifles my creativity, because every time I do, I feel bored with it. And then I just stop, because I just can't. I like the way it flows. Mm-hmm. So my characters, their story, it's they're telling me their story as I go through it. I'm not following any kind of outline. They're just coming to me, and I'm writing it all down.
Okay. That sounds a lot less painful than I expected it to be.
Yeah, no, with a romance, I feel like you really need to you kind of merely need to make the character likable. I know in like some books, like, you have you have the bad guys or whatever, and you can like really make them unlikable. But I feel like with romance, you really have to get it to the point where like the readers are going to fall in love with, like, especially the male character. You want them to fall in love with him. And then you also want the readers to relate to the woman, like the female main character, because that's, especially if you're a female reader, which is most of the genre. I mean, there are definitely male romance readers, but I feel like you have to find that connection. I feel like for a romance book, connecting with a character is very important, because you go on this journey with them. You know what's going to happen at the end. It's always a happily ever after in a romance. That is like the number one rule. It has to be at HEA.
Oh, okay.
So you know that, but it's about the journey that they take. So that is something that you really have to focus on when you're writing your characters and your stories. You have to focus on that journey, or else it falls apart.
Yeah, I found this an incredibly refreshing read on many levels, because I was rooting for both characters. I liked them both. And there wasn't, I hope that, I hope we don't get I hope not the bad guy doesn't win out, but, at every moment, I guess I'm used to, oh boy, who's going to get killed off? What's going to go wrong? And nothing can go right all the time.
Yeah.
But there's, I don't want to say lightheartedness, but there's a positivity in this that I'm not quite used to, and it was very refreshing. I will die on that hill. But,
that is my go-to. I am honestly, I have always liked those lighthearted, quick reads that you can just kind of read in like a weekend, or, some people read books in like a couple hours. Like, that was my goal for this. Yeah. They're like, I read a book a day. And I'm like, how do you do that? But like, I like writing my books like that, so that if someone needs like a palate cleanser in between, they have this fun little romance to go back to. Like, you sit there and you read a thriller or a dark romance, and you're like, I need something just a little fun. And you just go like, that's why I write them, for that little break from the hard, all the hardships that are out here in the real world. You come in here and it's just fun.
Yeah, I hesitated to say lighthearted at first, because I was afraid that it's going to make the book sound insubstantial. And it's not insubstantial at all. It's fun. I'm rooting for everybody. But there are also complexities. I mean, there are emotional difficulties that happen. And it probably wouldn't be interesting if you didn't have that in a way. And one of those was specifically with the main character, Ellie. And within the book, we not only get a romance, I think, but also something of a coming of age story with Ellie, at least in my reading. And she eventually realizes that like adolescent logic doesn't and maybe should not apply to people in their 20s. Yeah. And I'm curious, can you maybe talk a little bit about Ellie and how she matures throughout the novel?
I think what is great about writing characters of this age group is the fact that when you're in your early 20s to mid 20s, you're still trying, like, you're an adult, but you still haven't figured out life yet. Like, you're still in that, what do I do now? I've just graduated, I don't really know what direction I want to go. I mean, some people, they go right out of college and they find their direction. But I feel like in your 20s, you're still learning who you are. I mean, we're always growing, but I feel like your 20s are just that. You're just coming off your teens and you're trying to, work that. I think Ellie has a lot of that, because she's seeing her best friend. She's getting married. She has already a full-time job that, she's been working towards. And, she's now, and Ellie's like, well, I don't have any of that. And I want that. But, like, she's like, I'm getting older. And she's like, it's like, no, you're not, Ellie, relax. You're not getting, like, you're still, you're still young. But she has that mentality, like, oh my God, like, I'm going to be like the lonely cat lady, type of thing. Yeah. So, like, I feel like she has that mentality towards the beginning. And then, like, at the end, you see her, like, going towards a goal that she had wanted, right out of school, and she finally like goes for it, and she gets she gets an interview and everything, and you see that growth in her. And this book actually has Charlotte and Brian have their own story called The X Agreement. And in that one, it's now Ellie's turn to help her best friend through marital difficulties. Oh. So, like, I feel like you can see Ellie's, progress in the 2-week promise. And then as we go into Charlotte's story, it grows because now she's the one that, is the rock for her best friend. So her character definitely matures through the books.
Oh, okay. So you mentioned Charlotte and Brian. Is that in another book of yours? You continued
Yes.
this?
Yeah,
Oh,
I did. I
cool.
continued I made their story. Their story is actually a little sadder.
Uh-huh.
But
I'm not going to read it then.
Yeah, no, that one I made people cry. I got yelled at. I made people cry.
Oh, you got yelled at?
Yeah, I did. I
That's
got yelled at.
funny.
But yeah, there is a second one. It doesn't necessarily need to be read. Like, you can read these separately. You don't even have to read both of them. You could read the X Agreement first, and then, the 2-week. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's not like they're, book 1, book 2. It's just kind of interconnected. But yeah, they're. I like how, you could see Ellie by the end. She's a little more mature, and then we go into that, and she just she blossoms throughout the entire thing.
Yeah, there are a couple of recalcitrant moments about that near the end, because throughout the book she is so obsessed with this rule number 5. I can't break rule number 5, and they made these rules when they were like 11 or 12.
Yeah, they were like 14. I think it said 14, 15.
Yeah, and taking that, but she's so serious about it, but it's symbolic in a way, because it symbolizes like her loyalty to Charlotte, and Charlotte's actually the one who uncovers this sort of loyalty for what it is, and she says, I don't care if that you broke the rule. I cared that you kind of lied to me, and that's what it really was all about. And it's not an adolescent logic, but it's much more mature way of thinking about it. Yeah, I really, that was very well done. I really like that part of the novel. So let's talk a bit about Logan, the male lead. Again, my very limited exposure to romance, I kind of expected to encounter an unrealistic instance of male perfection in Logan, but he isn't that at all. How would you describe Logan and his sort of unique appeal?
You will see with my books, I don't tend to write like these men, like I guess the alpha male, I guess. I don't know. Like, I don't tend to write those kind of characters. My male characters, especially Logan, are more in the romance community. He would be considered, I guess, a cinnamon roll.
Oh, okay. Please elaborate on what a cinnamon roll is.
It's where they have like this kind of a hard exterior where, like, on the outside, like, as you know, when you first meet Logan, you hear that he's a little bit of a ladies' man. Like, he likes to, whatever. He's like, and he's got this like hardness to him because of his dad and everything. And so as he and then on the inside, yet he says these things, and you could tell he's just very, very soft, very sweet. They would say, or they would say gooey, because the cinnamon gooey. Like, that's how they describe it, is a cinnamon roll. So most of my characters are that. I do read books where, like, there's like the alpha billionaires and things like that. But for my stories, I don't know. I just like. I like the guys who just have that, the hardness on the outside, a little soft on the inside. That's just how I write them, because it's fun. I pretty much all my male characters are like that.
Yeah, and it's strange because in some ways he's very good at communicating in some very specific ways, but when it comes to like the gooey part of this cinnamon roll, he's not so much. No,
not so much until like a little bit towards the end when he's like, pouring his heart, like, don't leave me.
Yeah, he matures as well, I think.
And I feel like if there would have been any parts in his POV, which I didn't do in this book. I actually wrote a point of view of his for like a extra content for my newsletter. And like, I enjoyed exploring him as a character because I didn't get to do that in this book. And I felt like I made, like, inside he's a bit of a mush when it came to Ellie with the way that I wrote it. But yeah, I did that as like one of those like extra like newsletter or, on my website type of deal. And it was just fun to explore him because he was just a fun character and I didn't get to do that.
Cool. So I quite enjoyed the plot construction, and you mentioned this before, where it's a romance, or everything is going to end up
Yes.
end up in a good kind of way. But and the ending was foreseeable after the first few chapters.
Yeah.
But the whole process leading up to the end was really quite engaging, regardless of that. And maybe could you say a little bit more about your strategy here?
Yeah, I kind of used. Have you ever heard that the cat saves a novel where it's like that? There's like different acts like in the like.
Oh, right.
I kind of followed that. There's a romance. There's a plot beat for like the romance books. And I very loosely followed it as I was writing. Like I said, I don't plot or anything. So like I printed out the sheet, and as I was writing, I kind of just followed that along to just make sure I was hitting the right points at the right time as I was going through it. So that's pretty much what I used to, make those like little blips, like they were having a good time, and then there's a little blip, and then they have a good time, and then there's like I kind of use that as a roadmap to get me there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, several little instances of rising tension.
Yeah.
And okay. I had heard of, or I have heard of formulaic romances before, like I think the Harlequin romances were popular when I was, I guess, a kid and maybe into my adult life. And I'd always heard, okay, there's a form that everyone follows this form.
Yeah.
And I didn't sense anything formulaic at all.
Yeah, it's changed a lot now. There's definitely, you can stray a little bit, and there's even ones where there's called that third act breakup. Yeah. There are some romance books that don't have that now. So it's like there's so many different ways that it goes about it now.
So what were your favorite parts to write, and which aspects of the novel are you most proud of?
I think my favorite part to write was the scene where she wakes up and she's like, what am I doing here? Why am I in this bed with this man? Like, what is happening? Like, that was the first scene that, like I said, that was the first scene I saw in my head. And so writing that scene was just like, I don't know. I loved, that is was my favorite scene to write. It's always been I love that part where he's just like, he's just being him. He's like, well, you did it to yourself. Like, we were both having fun, but like, I love the teasing back and forth between it. Cause she's giving in, she wants to be there, but she's just like struggling with it because of the whole rule and everything. But like, I loved writing that scene. And like I said, that is my favorite scene in the entire book.
Oh yeah. It kind of grabs you too. Yeah. It's like, okay, now what's going to happen here? This is a big puzzle that has to be put together, and you're going to see what kind of picture shows up out of this.
Yes, I love that scene.
Cool. So there were quite a few maybe random details in the novel that I very much enjoyed. You just and none of these really have a substantial impact on the plot. And I guess it's not really much of a danger to talk about spoilers here. Yeah. But I hope it's okay if I just name a few of them.
Yeah, go ahead. It's fine.
Okay. What a bummer to be Ethan.
Poor Ethan. Or Egan. Egan as Charlotte called him.
Oh, Charlotte called him I forgot about that.
Yeah, in the one scene where she's like, oh, well, you're going to go on a date with Egan. And she's like, Ethan.
Yeah. Ethan kind of ends up being bummer. He has a crush on Ellie, and it was never meant to be.
No.
So, also, I think I'm showing my age here as a middle-aged guy, but how nice to be in one's 20s. Ellie and Logan eat chili dogs, White Castle, Domino's, chicken fingers with fries multiple times, and ice cream regularly. And they don't seem to be either physically or mentally affected by this diet. And I can just say I'm envious because I'm not going to.
I mean, in my 20s, I did eat a lot of White Castle. I loved White Castle. I used to work at FYE, so there was always like for like lunch, there was always like a fast food or something like right next door. And I was always like, I'm going to get Wendy's. I'm going to get White Castle. Like, And that was when I was in my 20s.
Yeah. Well, it's comfort food. And
Yes, exactly.
I suppose in some way in a romance, everyone sort of lives out a fantasy through the
Yeah.
book. And that was a small part of it for me, being able to eat
Like,
like that and
eat all
not
those food.
really. Yeah. And okay, there's one exception to that. Logan's stomach is, he says, heavily impacted by eating White Castle
Yeah.
in a negative way.
I
And
actually had a friend who lived, like, she was dying laughing. She was like, I can't believe you put that in there. I'm like, that is my humor. That is where I go.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But he wasn't affected by chili dogs, so
No.
right on, bro. Good for you. So for a moment, I thought you had actually worked at Home Depot because a 2-week renovation project and only one trip to Home Depot. Logan must be a very organized and skilled handyman.
Well, I feel like that was one of the reasons I did not write his point of view, because I'm like, I have no idea. I'm just gonna I vaguely researched different things, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna put this here, put this here. I'm like, well, while she's at work, he's gonna do this, so I don't have to put that in the scene.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, I think it might have been a little out of character for a romance novel to go into detail about the drywall process. But my experience at Home Depot pretty much aligns with what you described with the forklifts going everywhere and the Pergo flooring. I recognize the brand name.
Yep. It was the one flooring. I was like, I know that one.
Yeah. So hats off to Logan again. And hats off to Ellie as well for catching on to everything there. So are you self-published, or you work through an agency? Is that correct?
I actually am published through a small indie press. They are called Bloodhound Books in the UK. They first offered me a 3-book deal in September of 2021, which was for the 2-week promise, and then my other book, Capturing His Heart, and One Lucky Christmas. And then I ended up going into a second contract with them for my latest release, Off Limits, and also the X Agreement. So all 5 of them are released under Bloodhound, and I'm currently working on one, hoping to be able to submit it soon. But so far I have been working with them. They are a pleasure to work with, and the editors were great. Everybody was just so welcoming on the team. And it's just been a very mostly positive experience through the entire process. And they were able to even get me 2 audiobooks.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Tantor Audio picked up the 2-week promise and the X Agreement. So it was really cool to see, because that was one of my big goals. So
Fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about the other novels that you've written? You already mentioned one about Brian and Charlotte in the same universe, I guess I'll say.
Yes. Yeah. That one was released in, it was the end of October. Because it's a holiday setup. It's basically her and Brian are having marital trouble. They've been separated for about 6 months. They have a young son who is going through an autism diagnosis. I kind of used my experience with my own children through that, which was kind of, it was very emotional to explore, and I enjoyed doing it. But that one is, he doesn't tell his family that they have separated. They're living apart, but they're not divorced yet. And he is like, we told them we were coming to Christmas. And she's like, but we're not together. And he's like, can we just pretend? So, after talking to Ellie and Logan, Charlotte decides, all right, let's do this, because we'll do it for our son, so he can have his family together for Christmas, and he hasn't really seen that family. So they go and they pretend that they're in love for the family holiday. And so it's kind of an emotional roller coaster, because you see Charlotte going through how, she doesn't understand, why it didn't work out, and, financial burdens, and with their child going through everything. It was just hard for them. So that one was emotional and fun to write. And like I said, I made people cry. So I did my job. Okay. I did my job as a romance writer.
Okay. So we have an emotional high with the 2-week promise, and then I don't want to say an emotional low, but maybe a dip, something. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those relatable, some readers would be able to definitely relate to it, which is why I had one person that was like, I was sobbing because I was relating to Charlotte so much.
Oh, so how about your third book?
Well, the other books I have out are One Lucky Christmas. That one is that one is kind of like almost a Hallmark type of movie. Like if you were to compare it to anything, it is very Hallmarky. It's she goes on these blind dates that her mother sets her up on, and she can't find, she's trying to find the one for Christmas. Her mom nags her all the time. Like her mom's a real,
Yep.
And so she ends up going on 31 dates, and when she finally meets him, and they're trying to get together, but it's a very, very slow process. And the mom keeps meddling, and then there's the exes that come in and kind of like stir the pot a little bit. But it's mostly a very, very low spice, Hallmark, fun little romance that I enjoyed writing that one too. And then the other one is called Capturing His Heart. And that one's about a young woman who ends up losing her job at a magazine. So she comes back home to live with her parents because she was living in Manhattan. And we know how expensive, living in Manhattan can be. So she came back home and she ends up looking for like a job, and she goes to this photography studio. She sees a sign in the window. She goes, "Oh, an assistant, I can do that." And ends up being her brother's old best friend, who he used to play D&D with, and she used to kind of tease them about it. And he's like, "Oh, I don't want to hire you," but then he ends up doing it. And so it's like kind of like a workplace, second chance, romance type of deal. And it's a cute little nerdy. That's my nerdy novel.
See, you're speaking my language a little bit more there with the nerdy novel. So the podcast generally deals with, or we interview, as I'm sure you know, self-published authors and authors who have published through independent presses or small presses, such as the one you have. Is there any advice you would give someone who has a novel and is at that stage where they're thinking about maybe pitching it to an agent or self-publishing it? What was your experience? You've said a little bit about your experience there, but what advice could you give fellow authors who are in that space?
I would just say, I'm always that what if person. So like, I just say, go out there and do it. I never thought I would be able to get to that step where I'd feel confident enough to, put my work out there and trying, because it's a long, grueling process, especially if you are pitching to agents and, the small publishers and stuff like that. I would just say, keep going. And there's so many different paths to publishing. Like you said, you can go self-publish, you can do the small press, or you can go look for your agent. There's so many different routes you can take. And I think if you explore them and, you might find a better option. If one doesn't work out, you might find a better option in the other. So I think I just say, keep going. That's my advice.
Yep. Try different things.
Try different things, try different, different way to go about it. If you, if you're indie and maybe you're not doing it, try to send it out there to an agent or something. You never know what could happen.
Yeah. Just have to have a thick skin sometimes from what everyone's told me.
Do.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God, you do. Because like in the beginning, it was just like, I kept getting these requests and then they'd be like, "Oh, send me your full," reject. And it's just like, okay. Yeah. And then you'd get the ones that are like, "We really love your voice. You have a great voice and like your story is great, but it's not for me." And it's like, but it's great.
Something doesn't align there.
Yeah, but it's good. But why don't you like it?
Right.
So yeah, it's a very grueling process.
Did you get any agencies that gave you some really good feedback on how to?
Not really with agencies, but before I started to query, I actually did one of those mentorships that they had over on Twitter, back, I want to say like pandemic era. They did a lot of mentorships, and there was one where you would like pitch your thing on, you would send all of your stuff to these mentors, and then they would pick like a top 5 or top 10. And with one of the mentors, I ended up being a top 5 of hers. And so she was like, with my top 5, I'm going to send you all like an edit letter on how, you can improve this. So maybe next time you'll get in, or you can go and improve it for, to put it out there. And she sent me this whole letter. It was actually for the One Lucky Christmas, which I had done it with. And she was like, you could do this, this, and this. And I was like, that sounds perfect. Printed my thing, got it all set up. Then I wrote this book, and I did this one first.
Yeah.
But that one got picked up anyway. So like, I think that was like the best experiences, because I got the best advice from her. And I kept saying, I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. You helped me, become a published author.
Yeah, that sounds like a really shining facet of a wonderful community that was available.
Yeah, it was great. I loved those mentorships. I mean, it was another thing that you're waiting for rejection on, but at the same time, it was a great community, because that is how I met a very, very, a group that I'm very, very close with, a bunch of writer friends, and we all beta read each other's stuff. And we're just like a tight knit group. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have found them. So I think that was very helpful too, because they helped me with the 2-week promise. They were my beta readers for that. So I'm so grateful that I met them on that path. So
yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, what a good story. So we can find all of your novels on Amazon, I'm assuming.
Yep.
And the first 2 are in audiobook form. Is that correct?
Yep. You can get the 2-week promise and the X Agreement on audio. The 2-week promise is narrated by Amanda Stribling, and the X Agreement is narrated by Kingsley Rose.
Where can we find you on social media?
You can find me over on Instagram. I think I'm Regina Brownell author on like pretty much everything. Instagram, you can find me over on TikTok. My Twitter page is not the same as everything else, because that was created way before. But you can also find me on Facebook under Regina Brownell author as well, which I don't really post too much on there, but I'm there.
Okay, great. Well, we can put all that in the show notes if you email it to me.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So, Regina, this has been a wonderful conversation. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I did too.
I quite enjoyed your book as well. So
thank you so much.
I don't know if I'm going to read the second one yet, because you said it's going to make me sad. And I don't know if I have that in my emotional bag right now.
That's totally okay.
But if you get an angry email from me, then you'll know what happened.
I got a lot of angry messages for that one.
Okay, wonderful. Regina, again, it's been great having you.
Yes,
and
thank you so much.
wish you all the continued success as an author in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.